Let me get my screen shared and we can get started. Okay, awesome. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the first Impact Grantee panel in today's 1619 Impact Showcase. Certainly, we are grateful for your presence here today, and we are so thrilled that you have carved out time on your Saturdays to come and engage and learn with us in this transformative learning community. As you are coming in, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat because we'd love to know who you are and where you are watching from. The Pulitzer Center is excited to celebrate 5 years of partnership and impact with the 1619 Project, including opportunities to partner with incredible educators like our panelists here today. My name is Kendra Grissom, and I am a program assistant on the Pulitzer Center's K-12 team, and I support our 1619 education programs and am honored to be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to briefly introduce the Pulitzer Center and to make sure everyone is clear on logistics for today's showcase. The Pulitzer Center's mission is to champion the power of stories to make complex issues relevant and inspire action. We do this work in collaboration with journalists, educators, and other organizational partners like the New York Times and the 1619 Project. The Pulitzer Center believes that journalism can be a key element for mobilizing society and that people in communities who actively engage with systemic challenges will find solutions together. This slide captures the Center's 5 main journalistic focus areas at this time. Our partnership with the 1619 Project sits within our human rights, racial justice programming. Our programming today is a celebration of the work completed by our most recent program partners, our 1619 Impact Grantees. These grantees have engaged deeply with the project by utilizing and building on it as a part of the transformative work they do in their local communities. They are classroom teachers and administrators, graduate students and professors, after-school professionals, and museum directors. And they're all here to showcase their learning, programming, and impact. Following this panel, there will be 2 others where the rest of our 1619 Impact Grantees will present on their impact through community engagement and on students and classrooms. We will close the day with a keynote address from Pulitzer Center Education Partner and Professor of Social Studies Education, Dr. LeGarrette King. Please note the transition times between panels and prioritize attending those that are most relevant to your work. You will be able to use the same link to join each session. And lastly, your voice is important to us, and we want to help you stay connected to the conversation by posing questions. So please submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function. If your question is meant for a specific panelist, please include their name in your question. We will try to get to as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A portion of the event. If you're looking to access the session guide or any other information about the Impact Showcase, you will be able to access them through the Zoom event lobby. And now it is my honor to give our panelists space to introduce themselves. We'll begin with Abigail.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I just feel so wonderfully blessed to be here this afternoon. My name is Abigail Henry, she, her. I am currently a Schomburg Fellow at University at Buffalo. I'm also quite happy to see a lot of Buffalo area in the house today. I taught Black history 9th grade in West Philadelphia for 12 years prior to moving to Buffalo.
Thanks, Abigail. Dr. Ferrell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone and good afternoon. I'm excited to be here today and to join such a wonderful group of people and wonderful teams. I am Dr. Kimberly Ferrell. I am with Eastern Michigan University. I am a professor in the College of Education and Teacher Education, and I teach social foundation courses there at Eastern Michigan. Also in the city of Ypsilanti. I'm a community educator, and then I hold another role at the same university as the Women's Resource Center Coordinator. And thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrell. Maha?
Hello, thank you for being glad being here. I'm honored. among all the panelists. My name is Maha. I am a PhD student working on my dissertation on the last year. I'm a teacher on education with Dr. Kimberly, and I also do homeschooling K through 12, and I also do tutoring, private tutoring through individuals with disability, children with disability. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Hi, I'm Deb Bertlesman. I am the coordinator in the Office of Culturally Linguistically Responsive Initiatives in Buffalo Public Schools. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Buffalo in curriculum and instruction, focusing on anti-racist inquiry in literacy. And we did our project through the Western New York Network of English Teachers.
Thank you, Deborah. And last but not least, Valerie.
Hi guys, my name is Valerie Reppi. I'm a professor at Buffalo State, and I am the vice president of the Western New York Network of English Teachers, and I worked with Deb for this project.
Thank you to each of you for introducing yourselves, and now we're going to get into your presentations, starting with Abigail.
All right, great. Thank you so much. This is the second time I've had the opportunity to work with the Pulitzer Center. I was first a member of the inaugural cohort, where I put together 2 units using 1619 project resources. In my 12 years of teaching Black history, predominantly to 9th graders in West Philly, I have found that teachers have often said to me that they benefit more from model lessons. I learned a lot as a first, second, third year teacher when I would go into somebody else's classroom, experience their teaching strategies, and then bring that back to my own classroom. That was my motivation behind creating a teaching lab for this grant. What I did was I created 4 labs. So we met over 4 weeks. I came up with 7 lessons. The lessons all use 1619 project resources, time period being from like ancient Africa through like the start of the Civil War. Out of the 7 lessons that I modeled, I asked teachers to commit to doing 2 of the 7 lessons and to submit student work around those lessons. Because of that, I also provided teachers with a stipend. I never believe you should be asking teachers to do extra work without compensating them. I believe that's something that's really, really important. For this, though, I also created a Google site that I believe Kendra will drop for you. I wanted to make the resources that I created available to the public. That Google site contains all of the links to the Google slide decks, Zoom recordings of the lessons, plus examples of student work. I also, a few years ago, had the opportunity to work with Ishmael Jimenez and update the African American curriculum. Some of you might know that Philadelphia, if you're a student in part of the public schools, you have to take African American history to graduate. And so part of what I also did for this grant is a lot of the lessons also are in the School District of Philadelphia's African American history curriculum. So I went back into that curriculum and directly linked where teachers would find some of those lessons to the lessons I created to this grant. That way, any teacher, which is 200 plus in the School District of Philadelphia for teaching African American history, have access to those resources. You can go to the next slide, please. So I'll just talk very briefly about the lessons I decided to model. Like I said, there were 4 different labs. The first lesson I modeled was a read aloud of Born in the Water. One of the things I also want to mention too is my expertise is predominantly teaching at the high school level, but this lab also included elementary school teachers. So it was really important for me to scaffold and adjust the resources to fit their needs. So we did a read aloud of Born in the Water. One of the pages in Born in the Water, there is a link to African Mass. So I also shared with them how I teach about African Mass. The second week, one of my absolute favorite lessons is a 2-day lesson I created on the Kingdom of Congo. I modeled the second day of that lesson, which is an inquiry-based lesson, looking at King Alfonso's letter to King John. The second lesson is one that is published on the Pulitzer Center's website. It's a 1619 versus 1776 debate. That's one of the lessons where I always get a lot of feedback that it was really good practice to participate in that debate, and that's one that teachers frequently like to use in their classroom. Teaching Lab 3, I use Khalil Muhammad's sugar essay. I took an excerpt of that and combined it with teaching about antebellum life in the South and the role of sugar in slavery. And I followed up that lesson because it's quite heavy with a focus on enslaved resistance. The School District of Philadelphia has a wonderful lesson on different types of resistance, whether it be cultural, psychological, physical. And so looking at the way enslaved people resisted in all of those different categories. The last day of the lab focused on Black deaf children and Isaac Woodard. I'm going to speak about that one more specifically in the next slide. One of the ways in which this grant was just really, really wonderful is I got the opportunity to work with a Black deaf teacher who works in a secluded classroom. I met with her one-on-one beforehand with her and her interpreters. She was somebody who studied African American history at Temple University. And she just talked about how, she's like, I'm good at teaching hard of hearing students, but no one is really assisting me on how to teach Black students more about Black history, given their needs. And so what I did was on that very last day, I created a short lesson on the history of Black deaf people. And then I also made a connection to Isaac Woodard, who's mentioned in Nicole Hannah-Jones's opening essay on democracy. His story, that's something has really captivated me. The way in which he was blinded just a few hours after returning home and serving in World War II. And so we looked at the ways in which Black people have shown resilience despite having disabilities. And I just learned a lot about like Black ASL, the double marginalization a lot of deaf Black people experience. And it's made me think more deeply about how to better support them, their students, and their needs. All right, last slide, I think, is just some examples of student work. A lot of the teachers submitted African mass. These were created in elementary school classrooms, middle school classrooms, and high school classrooms. You will also see on the Google site, there is a document there for students to brainstorm their African mask, the purpose of the mask, how it might be used, what it stands for, how it represents their identity. I love this project because it's a way for students of all color to celebrate who they are and share that with other people in the classroom. After reading Born in the Water, at least 2 of the teachers submitted student work related to that book specifically. One of them was I Am From poems, which were really, really beautiful to read as they reflected on their neighborhoods, their families, their friends, their schools, their communities, as a way to celebrate their identity in that sense. And lastly, and this was new for me, I found on the 1619 Education's website portal some guidance on teaching about Harriet Powers and quilts. And so I had at least 2 teachers create quilts. One of them specifically worked with the art teacher and actually used cloth to embroider and make the quilts. The other teacher, who was in a middle school setting, just used construction paper, markers, and colored pencils, but still put them all together to patchwork a quilt. There is so much more, just like wonderful student work. All of it can be seen on the website, and I would be happy to talk more if you have questions about the student work or any of the specific lessons later in today's session.
Thank Thank you. And hello, my name is, again, Dr. Kimberly Ferrell. Thank you so much for having us. And accompanying me would be Ms. Maha Casey. We're representing the RIA team, Radical Educational Intersectional Activists, with the Cultivating and Elevating Black Consciousness project, where we did the Exploring the Legacy of Slavery and Racial Justice Advocacy. And so we're here today to unveil the various ways we spearheaded this wonderful project in our community and on campus, and represent it with a shared commitment to understanding, addressing, and dismantling systemic inequities that affect our communities across our nation and beyond. Along with the support of our team members, Ms. Shima Tonder and Ms. Diala Dager, both PhD students at Eastern Michigan University, we all came together as advocates and learners and change makers, united by a vision of a more just and equitable society, but to also have space for campus and community dialogues, the learning and the collaboration, and a place where every voice matters. And every perspective adds value to the conversation on legacy of slavery and then the importance of racial justice advocacy. So as we embark on this journey, let us approach it with open hearts and minds, ready to challenge our assumptions and deeper our understandings and build tools necessary to drive meaningful change. This is the thought process and the aspirations that my team came together in order to bring forth this project. Next slide, please. And so what you're looking at here is a graft from our Impact Grant project. Again, this is the second time my team came together to being in the second cohort with the 1619 Pulitzer Center. So we're grateful and appreciative for the grant and being a part of this wonderful fellowship program. And so this is a graph of the participants in the community and education and gives a snapshot of what we've done to move the needle towards creating pathways for the equity, inclusion, and justice to empower individuals and to strengthen our communities. So we collaborated with the student organizations, academic departments, local advocacy groups to broaden outreach and create an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere to encourage participation from all members of our campus community. So how did we do this? Now, first we started with a strategic plan. Then we created a larger committee to help create a kickoff conference to draw in large numbers of students, faculty and staff, and community members as an investment to the overall project of a campus lecture series. The conference allowed Black business owners, vendors, community activists, and advocates to join us in the mission of raising awareness on the injustices that are plaguing, particularly Ypsilanti and the surrounding cities like Ann Arbor and Detroit. And so just a couple of the injustice that we were discussing in this project and trying to find solutions to is racism, racial profiling, housing insecurities, racial segregation, food insecurities, homelessness, joblessness, unequal distribution of resources, as well as the things that are happening amongst our working class and the lower class citizens. So in conjunction to the conference, we involved student performances and took a small group of individuals to the Ann Arbor Museum for the Slave Quarters tour and the Underground Railroad experience that talked about slavery from Ypsilanti through Detroit and to Canada. We also addressed community development. We spoke to farmers and agriculturalists about environmental health and food security, and we did outreach initiatives and organized meetings with youth. And so the bulk of our project included this powerful campus lecture series. And so next slide, please. And Ms. Maha, if you can talk to the audience a little bit about the power of our campus lecture series. Maha, I think you're still muted.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The Black Conscious Kick-Off Conference and African American Museum Slave Quarters, and the Underground Railroad Group Tour was September through November Racial Justice Campus Lecture Series. And the September-December was community advocacy meetings. And September through December was Campus Support Network Partners. Next slide, please.
Okay, and so with that said, just before we go to the conclusion, we gave the students an opportunity to explore and complete final reflection papers, final district comparison projects, and a final cultural relevant K-12 lesson plan. And we also track the students' learning progresses and involvement by attendance, sign-ins, and surveys and assessments. And so with all that, as well as us creating a 7-week and once-a-week course curriculum and a toolkit on exploring the legacy of slavery and the racial justice advocacy, with culminating projects such as those workshops and seminars on organizing and final presentations from the students. And so these series of lectures built upon one another, offering a cohesive journey for our attendees. And so with this conclusion, creating a unique and innovative racial justice advocacy project required a combination of creativity, strategic planning, and community engagement. By understanding the community's needs, leveraging new educational tools, incorporating creative expression, and fostering collaboration, racial justice advocates who desire to do this work that's similar to ours can design projects that not only raise awareness, but also empower communities to take action and create lasting change. Racial justice advocacy encourages discussions towards dismantling systems of racial oppression while ensuring that all members in the community can contribute to the fight for justice and equality. And so together we inspired critical conversations, cultivated empathy, and empowered and elevated the consciousness of individuals to become active participants in the pursuit of equity and justice on campus and beyond. So we want to say again, thank you for listening and for your unwavering dedication to this critical work.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Dr. Ferrell. It's hard to follow up that conclusion, but I'm going to do the best I can. I just want to set the stage a little bit. I'm coming into this presentation with a lot of joy today. There are students across me. There's like windows dancing right now, trying to distract me from giving this presentation because we're having our winter celebration this Saturday. So there's a lot happening, but that is bringing me a lot of joy. And the fact that Buffalo is really here. Buffalo, New York, we are doing it. That makes me so proud and happy. And I'm not from Buffalo, but it is my city, and I am so happy that Buffalo is here. So yay, Buffalo. Thanks for everyone being here today. I know it's hard to take time out of it Saturday, and I appreciate it. So again, my name is Deb Bertlesman, and together with many people from the Western New York Network of English Teachers, including Val Reppi, who is here, we created, through the 1619 Pulitzer Grant, the 1619 Teacher Summer Institute. One of the things we noticed, and we spent a lot of time through the Western Network of English Teachers working with like-minded educators to sort of focus on social justice inquiry-based teaching. And we noticed there were teachers who wanted to do the work, but were struggling to do the work. So we were hoping that this institute would bring those teachers who were interested, but sort of like stumbling a little bit through it to sort of come together and work through their stuff. We did this work in collaboration with WinnieNet, Buffalo State University, and the Center for English Teaching out of Buffalo State. Next slide, please. Can I change it? Oh, there we go. So to talk about teacher recruitment and how we did it, I'm just going to talk about WinnieNet a little bit. So we are the Western New York Network of English Teachers. We're a social justice-oriented, inquiry-based network of English teachers across Western New York. We span almost every district in Western New York, all the way out to Rochester. And we decided to use WinnieNet as sort of our way to recruit teachers, along with Buffalo State University. WinnieNet was started about 10 years ago. No, 12 years ago now. Oh my God, so old. WinnieNet was started 12 years ago. And the goal was to make teachers who are doing social justice oriented inquiry-based teaching not feel so alone in departments that are often very traditionally oriented. And our goal was to make sure those teachers felt supported. So we use WinnieNet to sort of try and recruit like-minded teachers for the project. Val, did you want to add anything about WinnieNet that I may have missed?
No, you got it all.
Okay, great. So what we did initially, we had only allotted funds to have, I think it was 6 to 8 teachers get a stipend and participate, but we ended up having 12 teachers say they were interested, and we just could not bear to deny those teachers a place in the program. So WinnieNet contributed more funding than originally put in the grant to make sure that we could include all the teachers who wanted to participate. And we were happy to get a greater number than we did. And that includes 2 people who dropped out. So like that was pretty awesome. Then we ran the Summer Institute, which was 4 days where teachers met at Buffalo State. And we worked a lot on a few things. We wanted to define what anti-racist inquiry means in teaching practice, which is not something that is often addressed in the literature. We see a lot of work about anti-racist practice, right? We see a lot of work about inquiry, but often when people are talking about anti-racism, it still is in a pretty like, let me teach you about anti-racism and like giving people definitions and facts and information, but not always necessarily engaging in the inquiry-based work. So we wanted to figure out what that meant. We spent time doing that through the 1619 project. Then teachers built lessons to implement in their classrooms. And these were based on their context, right? We know that teachers have these very specific contexts to work in. And we had teachers all the way out from Holland, New York, which I don't know if you know Holland, but it is rural. And then teachers in Buffalo. So it was a really, really interesting mix of all different types of teachers from all different types of contexts trying to do this work.
Sorry, Deb. We also had brand new teachers, their first year going into their first year of teaching, and veterans teachers, upwards of 20 years of teaching, wanting to figure out how to make this work in their classroom. And some teachers had to make it work within curriculums that they were mandated to use, and some had complete freedom. And it was really great to let everyone just kind of collaborate and figure it out together. Sorry to cut you off, Deb.
No, it was certainly, we wanted to, I think it's really important because a lot of times teachers go through professional development where it's just a quote unquote expert, which is not always true, talking at teachers about a thing, right? And sometimes it's a company and they come in and talk for 45 minutes and then they leave. So we wanted to really make sure this was a collaborative like work between teachers who were in classrooms in different spaces. So we did that for 4 days. And then teachers were asked to implement those lessons in their rooms. So we ended up working across 7 different institutions, 9 different classrooms, because some were in some of the same districts across Western New York. And then those lessons all became a part or were put on our website, which I'll talk about the name and of that website and that kind of thing in a minute, but I'll link it in the chat. So if you want to click on that link, feel free to kind of explore as I'm talking through it a little bit. So you'll see it's organized by teacher because we love to uplift our classroom teachers and make sure they're getting all the credit that they deserve because they built the work and they did the work with kids. And in each of those folders on the resources page there, when you click on the link, you'll see their lessons, and you should also see some examples of student work from their lessons that came directly from those classrooms. The lesson implementation was complex for our teachers. Some teachers were able to do it without any pushback and it went really well. Some teachers got pushback because they come from like the same large urban district that I work in, where it's a lot of sort of top-down standardized assessment. And when you move away from that assessment, people get a little nervous. And then some teachers got pushback from whole groups of parents that sort of came at them a little bit for doing this work. But it was interesting because we had each other to support each other to kind of work through that. After the lesson implementation, 2 of our teachers, Val?
Yes, that's correct.
Kicked off our fall conference for the Western New York Network of English Teachers. They presented their work to everyone at the conference, and then everyone who was in the 1619 Summer Institute attended the conference. Val, Val was kind of our leader through that whole conference. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So in the opening keynote, the two presenters shared their lessons, what went well, what they were working on, what didn't go well, and what they might change in the future, so that if in that reflection they could help someone else to try and implement the same lessons or ideas, hopefully that would help. And then we had multiple sessions throughout the day that were designed and picked by the participants. And in those sessions, all of the 1619 participants and Summer Institute teachers were there and included and infused the things that they had been working on and the resources that they had created into those sessions. So it kind of like permeated everyone else throughout the session and throughout the day, so that by the end of the conference, everyone had a good understanding of what resources were available and at least one way to potentially use it in their classroom going forward.
And I don't want to sort of explain it too much because I don't know how well known it is or not, but it was an unconference style conference, which is a style of conference where the participants decide what will be addressed in the groups, and then have to have a product at the end of the group again. So instead of coming into a conference, being told you have to do something, being talked at, teachers all work together to kind of decide what they wanted to talk about and what they wanted the result of that talk to be. Next slide, please. So the things that sort of came out of this were really interesting. The teachers who are involved in the project were very eager to continue beyond the scope of the project. So when the 1619 Teacher Summer Institute ended, there were still a lot of teachers. There's like a whole, there's like group messages and text messages and people are talking to each other and they're like, we still want to do this. We still want to continue doing this. So what we did was we took some of the teachers who were involved in the 1619 Summer Institute and some of our teachers from another project, and we formed the Anti-Racist Inquiry Teacher Collective. And this is a group that is supported by WinnieNet, you know, the whatever, $50 of funding that we have in our bank account. Just Buffalo Literary Center, which is a local literary center in the city of Buffalo, and sort of the Pulitzer Center through the work with the 1619 project and the Teacher Summer Institute. And it's sort of moved into that. So it's going to continue to grow, where we're going to continue to create resources and spaces for educators to think about what it means to be an anti-racist inquiry-based teacher. Finally, the teachers from the 1619 Teacher Summer Institute will be bringing their students to our Youth Voices conference in the fall. This is the largest youth-based conference in Western New York. And we've been doing it for, I want to say this is our eighth
I think
year?
so. Yes.
It's our 8th year. So they are going to bring students, and many of those students are going to present projects and works that came out of the anti-racist inquiry work incorporating the text from the 1619 project, and they're going to present them. And we usually have about 500 attendees at that Youth Voices conference to listen to these amazing young people share all the amazing things that we've done. So we're just excited that this grant kind of like expanded beyond its original goals. Val, did you want to add anything else?
Yes, there's a ton of Buffalo representation here. So if you know of teachers who would like to present at or have their students present at Youth Voices, reach out to us. I can put our contact information in the chat, and we would love to have additional people presenting and sharing their wonderful student work.
That's excellent. Thanks, Val, for saying that. Thanks.
That's it. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your wonderful presentations and letting us get a glimpse into the incredible work that you've been engaging in over the course of the grant program. So I'm now excited to be able to ask you all a few questions to learn more about your work. I want to encourage members of our audience to use the Q&A function to pose your questions as well. So this first question is open for anyone to answer, but I would love to know how the 1619 project influenced the design and the content of your program. Which specific project elements did you integrate and why?
We are anyone can answer. I don't want to
Yeah, anyone
interrupt.
can answer. Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking space. So the thing that I love about the 1619 project, and I've sort of said this before, is that especially for newer teachers or teachers who came out of schools of education that didn't necessarily address anti-racism, or it's really beautifully written pieces that are digestible for people who aren't necessarily used to having those complex conversations. So I think the pieces that talked about sugar and the pipeline and the plantations really help take these like complex issues and make them easy for teachers to implement and understand, for especially for teachers who had never done this work before. That was the real impact it had for us.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Sure, I would like to piggyback off on that thought as well. So my team utilized the New Origin Story series, specifically democracy, race, capitalism, music, fear, those things from the 1619 project to formulate some of our curriculum assignments and activities. And this is very important because placing these project resources as central focuses for the legacy of slavery in American history topics. And then as we highlighted the contributions of Black Americans and things of that nature to find solutions to racial justice in the school as well as in the community, we were actively seeking to reframe the narrative of these things that were happening in our community. And so examining how slavery impacted various aspects of our society, from the economy and healthcare and things of that nature, was prompting a more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the past and the present racial dynamics. And so these are the things, these are the elements, I would say, that we chose to use to integrate and design the content around our program. And then the wonderful, wonderful resource of the 1619 project and those components that we use really inspired our learners. So just seeing the way that our pre-service and in-service teachers responded to it was just very, very, very powerful. Thank you.
Abigail, did you want to share before I pose the next question?
I would just add to what was just mentioned by Dr. Ferrell. I use a lot of similar essays from Democracy, Fear, and Justice. Those are some of my absolute favorites, along with the ones, along with Khalil Muhammad's Sugar. What I have to do though is like, I'll have to find the 2 or 3 to like 6 paragraphs that I want students to read versus assigning the entire essay for teachers.
So thank you all for your answers to that question. Now, when we designed the 1619 Impact Grant Program, it was to allow for more creative projects that went beyond the scope of a unit implemented in a classroom setting. And your presentations represent, the broad range of work that could have been done or achieved through this grant program. And so I'm curious to know how each of you decided to approach your project. How did you decide upon the methods you would implement to achieve your goal, and how the process has impacted your ongoing development as educators and continuous learners?
I can answer that second part of the question, going in terms of like how it's impacting my current work. To go back to Isaac Woodard, who's mentioned in the democracy essay. And I was doing research just on like existing lesson plans that were available for him. And one of the things that I encountered was that a lot of the lesson plans suggested were primarily primary sources from white people. I could not find a lesson plan that was using Isaac Woodard's words or the Black community coming around to support him after he went blind. I know LeGarrette King is actually closing keynote for today. He's actually my advisor at UB. And one of the things he talks about a lot is just like the perspectives in Black histories that we do not hear about. And learning Isaac Woodard's story is pushing my thinking, my own research to find those voices. It does matter to me that Isaac Woodard's story helped Harry Truman slightly changed his views on race, that Orson Welles went public with what happened to Isaac Woodard. But just as important to me, and I believe for my students, are the Black people that were around him. Like, who taught him once he became blind? Who in his community? Was it his parents? Was it somebody at his church that was helping him to get around, especially in those first few weeks after? And those are the perspectives that I believe is just as important as the people that we traditionally read about in history textbooks.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about what inspired as a collective and individual for the RIA team. So personally, and then also we've shared this amongst our collective while building this project from prior on and this one as well. And so our oppressive experiences as Black women and women of color. So starting as girls, and us experiencing our own oppressive experience in education, things like discrimination and disproportionately punished just for being who we were and trying to learn and access that type of learning to be better in our academic and social lives as little girls. I think really formulated the way that we wanted to get into education and to transform the ways that the education system functions as what we call collective as a broken system. And so personally, my approach has been teaching with political consciousness for racial and social justices for students. This was a concept I personally conceived, finding that most of the pre-service and in-service students weren't aware of the different political ways that infiltrated our education system, like race in education, and how those concepts can negatively impact not only our students' learning, but also how teachers frame their curriculum as well as activities. And so I found that the students that I was teaching did not know of these things and weren't incorporating the awarenesses of systemic inequalities and inequities and those power dynamics that was related to race in the classroom. And so then I used, and it's as well as the RIA team, I believe we used the energy and the experiences from our girlhood into womanhood and higher education, and started to encourage critical thinking about these issues amongst our students, and empowering our students to understand that potentially this kind of work can move the needle towards dismantling oppressive structures through learning. And so those were the things that I would say they helped inspired to pursue this type of work and continue to pursue this type of work in the community as well as on campus. You have to have a level of compassion. You got to know what's going on with your community. You have to develop a relationship and center your students' experiences in the curriculum. So regardless of the background of your students, regardless of what they were how do I say, was experiencing but connected to in their personal lives, we would cultivate the classroom and the community of that learning environment so that they could bring their whole selves into the learning. And so those are the different type of approaches that the RIA team has talked about using in our curriculum and in our classroom.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ferrell. Yeah, Deborah?
So I just wanted to, Kendra, forgive me. So the question was like, how did we decide on the methodologies, the way in which we approach the project?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm actually answering it. So I will say that in our experience, the Western New York Network of English teachers with teachers for over a decade, one of the things we found when it came to anti-racist teaching was that, or, you know, what people think is anti-racist teaching or think is culturally responsive or culturally sustaining education, or what people think is critical race theory, whatever it is. Those are different things, right? Even though they often get sort of smashed together in this one like messy kind of ball. we found that there were teachers who would often have some components of one of those things, some components of another of those things, but it was difficult, especially for new teachers and teachers who had not done anti-racist work ever before, to try and do it in a way that was truly meaningful and impactful and didn't cause harm. So we wanted to make sure that when we were doing this work, it was a collaborative effort between local teachers across a couple of different contexts, so that teachers were learning from each other, not sort of learning from just like one person who was speaking to them. So I think that that's why we decided on that particular like method. And how we approached it. I think teacher to teacher professional development is extremely important to us as an organization. So we wanted to make sure that we were supporting that that work.
Thank you. Now, do you all mind sharing some of the challenges that you faced during the designing and implementation of your programs and how you navigated those challenges?
We I'll say we came across the challenges because a few of our teachers came from Buffalo Public Schools, the district where I am right now, where I work. And their English teachers work with a very prescriptive curriculum. I don't know if you guys had modules, but in any of the areas where you are, but they sort of like Common Core came in, they developed these very prescriptive modules. Our district took them up, and our district is the only district in New York State who has not eliminated them yet. And those modules do not allow for uplifting of student voice, and they certainly do not allow enough space for the uplifting of the voices of Black and Brown people. So as a teacher in that district who has worked with the curriculum, working with other teachers, I sort of always approached it as, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. And if somebody has a problem with that, I'll just deal with the consequences, and that's fine. But I learned through this that that's not the approach that all teachers want to take. So we figured out how to work with people to kind of like look at this more prescriptive curriculum and say, well, what risks are you willing to take? And where can we find space? Because it is riskier to not find space than it is to just leave it how it is. So it was interesting. I learned a lot about someone who just like didn't care and was going to do whatever they wanted anyway, about how to sort of navigate things in a way that like people approached it a little differently. And we did get pushback in some classrooms from parents. I don't know if you guys know Moms for Liberty. Do you guys know them? I'm on a hate list. Anybody else on a Moms for Liberty hate list? No? Okay. So we have a pretty strong Moms for Liberty sect here in Western New York. And one of the classrooms got some pushback for Moms for Liberty. So we worked with that teacher and worked with like how to help her communicate with her administration to make sure that the work she was doing was not going to be completely torn down, but we didn't modify too much. So, but those were some of the challenges we came across.
I definitely did not have the challenge of Moms for Liberty. I've been feeling so blessed that a lot of my teaching was done in Philadelphia, and teachers there just don't encounter that resistance so much. So for me, the challenge I mentioned a little bit when I was presenting earlier was more just becoming more educated in Black Deaf history. I had to reach out to my network. I needed to do more reading. I needed to watch TED Talks. I also just like, you know, when you're teaching online, it already requires so many things from like sharing your screen, monitoring the chat. And I had to get some practice in learning how to make Zoom more accessible for a deaf Black teacher, from being able to pin the interpreters to make sure that the interpreters are in the breakout rooms, to just reminding the public and the other teachers in ways to not talk so fast. So little things like that. But I also, that just makes me think more about like ways in which we can make not only our teaching, but our resources and technology more accessible to others.
Thank you.
And just a couple of challenges, I think surface level and then some a little deeper, that is continuously experience of growth and development for both the students we teach, but also as a teacher ourselves. So first, just trying to make sure that we obtain the right organizers, activists, and grassroots teachers and guest lecturers and things of that nature to teach certain courses that aligned specifically with racial justice or social justice advocacy. So at Ypsilanti, it's kind of pushing and pulling, not just in our local area, but then we reach further out towards the Detroit area and things of that nature, where the activism and also the organizers are more plentiful, I should say, and available and readily available to step into the classroom. So that was the first thing, just making sure we found the right guest lecturers to teach and that what was aligning with our curriculum. And then the last thing, I may have mentioned this a little bit in our previous cohort. So Eastern Michigan University is a predominantly white institute. And in the teacher education courses and things that we teach, 95% of our students are not colored. They are white students. And so when we talk about subjects like racial justice, advocacy, social justice advocacy, we talk about race in education and formulating anti-racism tools and things of that nature. At the beginning of the course and teaching these things, and then making sure we coupling them with like the cultural relevant pedagogy and things of that nature, or historical literacies and things of that nature, really challenges the students to kind of think outside of their experiences. A lot of my students would say that this is the first time I've had an African American or Black teacher, and I'm about to graduate. This is my first time having an Arab American immigrant teacher like Maha Casey. And so at the end of the course, it's just so rewarding. They're hugging us. They're trying to take pictures. They're trying to give us gifts and everything. But just getting through that with trying to help our pre-service and in-service teachers really grasp the activities, the concept of this, because they're about to step into the classrooms and they have never been challenged in this sphere of learning about anti-racism tools and how important it is to have these things interweaved into the classroom curriculum, as well as in the activities when you're teaching, especially in urban education schools. So predominantly white pre-service and in-service teachers that we're instructing are actually going to teach in urban schools that are predominantly with Black students and Hispanic students. And so that's just a little bit of things, we wanted to touch on in regards to how we, have to just keep adjusting to make sure that everything is, I guess, at an understanding level, and there's critical thinking that is happening with our students to grasp these different concepts that they are challenged with, because a lot of them haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna piggyback from Dr. Kimberly Ferrell. So some of the students that we've been teaching, and I've been telling them in the past 3 years, is that we teach them through the academic books, but there's a lot of experience that they have not dealt with. And in Michigan, Dearborn has the highest Arab Muslim in the whole United States. And it also has the highest Arab Chaldean Arabs in Michigan, throughout different cities, Troy and Sterling Heights and everywhere. And so as an Arab American, and as a woman of color, I try to bring my own experience in teaching them, is that not only you need to be taught in academic, like regular professor, and I always tell them, like, yeah, what I've been taught in my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, even in the PhD program, the classes that I went through, it was just books and articles and research. It was very little of experience dealing with racism and oppression. And then also when I tell them is that when you go into the urban community, is that compared to the white community, you will deal with a different, not only parents, you will deal with grandparents, you will deal with aunt and uncle, you will deal with homelessness, you will deal with poverty. And some of them, feedbacks that I've got from them is that they were taken back by it, because like one student said to me, she goes, this is like the first time I've heard this. I grew up in Birmingham. Well, Birmingham is a very wealthy white neighborhood. And so what I try, and Dr. Kimberly, is that we bring in experience beside the education books that's required in the syllabus. And then I tell them is that these students in the urban, they have a lot of struggles. And coming from my background of teaching students with disability, autistic, ADHD, all different kind of learning disability, is what is the scenario? What would you do if you were put in this situation as a teacher? Because a lot of Black students and students of color and Arabs, they slip through the cracks. When they get in trouble. And so when I bring those scenarios to them, they have a better understanding. By the end of the semester, their mind of thinking is widened. They're thinking outside of the box, and not, and still keeping the academic books and what they've written in their papers, but also having an experience learning from us. And I think that's very, very important. For students to hear it from students who are experienced and who has been through it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Maha. So as we transition to our panel close, we have a couple questions from the audience that I'd love for us to be able to answer quickly. One is for Valerie and Deb, and I'll direct the second one to Abigail. Shelley asked, how did teachers respond to parents who oppose the content of the program? That's for you, Valerie or Deb.
So for us, I have sort of a twofold answer to that. In my district, this is sort of like separate, but one we got parent pushback from, but we have a Department of Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives in my district that I work for. So when there is in my district parent pushback, we have a set of curriculum, a set of standards, a set of practices that say, basically in our district, we are expected to be culturally responsive and anti-racist. So it's lucky that in my district, a super simple response to that is like, well, we have a policy in place. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So that's easy. In easy-ish, right? In other districts, what I directed two teachers to do was to rely on the CRSE framework for New York State. So New York State has a culturally responsive framework. So if they were getting a lot of pushback from a parent, I would suggest, I was like, okay, here's the link to the framework. You're a New York State certified teacher following the New York State standards. Here's the culturally responsive framework, right? And once you pull that out, there's not really a lot to say back to that. So that's kind of how we roll.
Thank you. And final, Valerie, go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's okay. It was also important to get the administrators on board and making sure that they were being supportive of the teachers. So it was sometimes work with the administrator and then help the administrator to support the teacher to like combat against some of these things. So team effort for sure.
So thank you. Last question, last moment, last thought.
Valerie's so nice. Valerie was like, it was a team effort. I was like, just send the people the forms. She was like, no, we like work together. And I'm like, they can't, there's policy. Anyway, sorry.
So I see Valerie's already addressed this question in the chat. This is coming from Petra, but Abigail would love to know if you have any thoughts on this. How do you deal with unconscious bias in administration and our colleagues? And are you able to work as a community?
Can I start? Okay, so when I taught in North Carolina, I was there for 7 years in Wake County Public Schools. And we started with the same modules that Deb is talking about using in Buffalo Public Schools. And in those modules, like it said, that there's no room for wiggle room or anything. But there are places where things can get a little spicy and should get spicier. So what we did is we practiced this: interrupt when you hear something, stop it right away, don't let it continue, question what you're hearing and why they're saying that, what the motive is. We talked a lot about impact and intent and how those are not always the same. Educating wherever we can, and then echoing the positives, so that if someone is speaking up against some of these things, that they realize that they're not alone in these mindsets. So amplifying the positives and the people who are interrupting and questioning and educating. And it works the same way with our colleagues. I've had colleagues say some pretty horrible things. But Deb, thank you. And sometimes you only have to get to, wait, why did you say that? Or can you explain that a little bit more? Or I'm shocked that you said that out loud, or you felt that. And sometimes just those first two steps make a huge difference and stop it right there. When I'm teaching my methods classes, now that I'm at Buffalo State, we actually practice peer-to-peer. You hear something, what do you say? In some very low stakes, just so that people have something in their toolbox to combat these things with.
Thanks, Valerie. Abigail, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Not too much. The only other thing I would build upon what Valerie's saying is I practice with other teachers, like how to react when students might say something in the classroom that you're unprepared for related to race. Because oftentimes some teachers like tend to ignore, and I just remind them of like the impact that has on the students of color in the class. If racist comments are made by another student and go unaddressed, and then we might practice them together, like how to respond to that scenario after school.
I wanted
Awesome.
to say quickly something is that in the past 3 years at being working with Dr. Kimberly is that I have been presenting students with a lot of them say, okay, so they have different confusions, like, okay, Arab Americans. Okay, so I say, well, there are Arab, Muslim Americans, and there's also Chaldean Americans. And so I've been teaching them that because the Chaldean community differs from the Muslim community. And I'm trying to educate that. And so when students ask me, what's the difference? They could be both from Iraq, and that's the difference. Is that this one could be Muslim, that could be Chaldean, but they're both from Iraq. So that's a very important education for me to tell them. When students have asked me several times, well, they say, well, I don't know what's the difference. I thought they were all, Arabs. And so then I have Chaldeans who kind of define, they want to have their own identity, and I wanted it to respect both cultures. So I've been running into that, telling students, they've asked me, many of them, what's the difference? And so that's been a little bit challenge to explain to them what's the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you to all of you, our wonderful panelists, for being here today. Thank you for being part of our Impact Grant program and for the incredible work that you've done, and we're confident that you will continue to do. Thank you to all of our audience members for joining us for this panel. We hope that you'll join us as we continue. Our next showcase event is our panel on 1619 Impact through Community Engagement. It begins at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time, and so we hope you'll stick around for that conversation. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful working with all of you. Thank you.